Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to T3M or topic of this month. The topic of this month is data, and today we have with us once again Dave Bermingham, Director of Customer Success at SIOS Technology. Dave, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me again. I'm glad to be here talking with you today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to host you again. And today, when we look at, of course, data is a big, we can talk about one aspect, but what we are going to talk about today specifically is high availability in the cloud. How would you define high availability or disaster recovery in the cloud native world? Because sometimes when we look at cloud, it does take care of a lot of things. Availability is something they offer. Of course, recovery from any failure is also they offer. So sometimes people folks that cloud is a magical place and you don't really need it. So I want to understand high availability disaster recovery in the cloud native world.
First off, high availability and disaster recovery are key aspects of system management that, aim to ensure that your services are not disrupted and that data is not lost in the event of a problem. In the cloud native world, HA is typically achieved through redundancy and failover mechanisms with services running on multiple instances across different zones and different regions in the cloud. Disaster recovery, on the other hand, can involve things such as backing up systems and data and generally having a plan in place to restore systems from those backups in the event of a disaster, such as a system-wide outage. Now, running in the cloud, you mentioned, it's a magical place, and that is kind of, some people might think that, right? So, I'm moving to the cloud. I no longer have to worry about high availability disaster recovery. And of course, cloud vendors do provide several tools and mechanisms to help and facilitate high availability and disaster recovery, but it's really ultimately up to the customer to properly utilize these in their architecture. And the cloud is not immune to outages and errors and other issues. We've seen major outages, minor outages. It's just as susceptible to outages as your own data center. So therefore, you must still have a robust, high availability and disaster recovery plan in place to ensure uninterrupted service and data protection.
As we talked about cloud, a lot of times, depending on who you talk to, when we look at cloud, a lot of time folks think that since everything is running in the cloud, you really don't have to worry about high availability or disaster recovery. Folks also feel that practices like chaos engineering and resiliency and redundancy that kind of eliminates the need of having any HADR either approach or solution. But the fact is that these two words have to coexist. One is more about practices and culture, and other is more about actual solutions and services, whatever you want to call them. So I do want to talk a bit about these two things as well.
Yeah, and that is a common misconception I hear all the time, with people moving to the cloud and, we don't need to have, we don't need to do anything in terms of backups or, doing anything to ensure resiliency. And, they're really two different things. At SIOS, we help in both areas, but let's take a look at the resiliency, or I think of the high availability aspect. So, being able to keep your data in sync in a synchronous fashion, so no data loss across multiple cloud zones, availability zones, or every cloud vendor has a different name for it, but getting it from one data center to another and having a duplicate copy in real time is absolutely what you need to do for high availability. That's for the data protection. And then, of course, the application monitoring, failover, that ensures that you survive from, minor blips or user error or something like that. So you can have, the 4 nines of availability, very minimal downtime, 5 minutes or less a month of downtime. But if you implement that, that's great, and you should absolutely do that. But that does not eliminate the need for having a robust backup strategy and disaster recovery strategy. You may lose the entire region, so it doesn't matter that you have your data copied synchronously between availability zones in that region. That entire region could go offline. It could be natural disaster, could be human error, whatever. And we've seen that happen. So you need to have that disaster recovery plan for that major type outages, but maybe even more likely, you hear in the news of people, have these people coming in and they're holding your data hostage. They're encrypting all your data and they want you to send them, $1 million in Bitcoin, and they're going to give you the key to unencrypt your data. Either you pay you send them the Bitcoin, or you hope that you have an archived copy that is offsite, inaccessible, something that the bad actors have not gotten access to encrypt that as well. So you still need to have that failsafe or that airbag in place for those situations you just can't expect to happen. So that's no different than on-prem. In the cloud, it's the same. The cloud just gives you some additional tools. A lot of the cloud vendors have backup, and so that you can take images of your systems and replicate them, and incrementally, maybe with a 5-minute RPO or 15-minute RPO or thereabouts. And that's great. You should absolutely take advantage of those functionalities. At SIOS, we can do real-time asynchronous replication between regions that gives you even a lower RPO. But that's, you need to take advantage of those tools. And of course, the infrastructure in place in the cloud, where else do you have the ability to have 20 or more data centers spread across the entire world? So how you design your disaster recovery plan has just become a whole lot easier in terms of the infrastructure. You don't need to build out data centers just to host your disaster recovery. Cloud vendors already done that for you.
When we look at not only just SIOS ecosystem, but in general, there are companies who are in different stages of their cloud native or digital transformation journey. A lot of companies, of course, they were born in the cloud era, but a lot of companies which have been around for a while, which means they do have a lot of experience of HNDR in on-prem, but as they migrate, they move to the cloud. Of course, they have to look at it from the lens of cloud. So talk a bit about how is HNDR different in cloud as compared to on-prem, and how do you folks enable these users to kind of seamlessly continue their journey?
High availability and disaster recovery is different in the cloud compared to on-prem. For a few reasons. So first, the cloud platforms, like I was mentioning earlier, they provide native tools and services for HA and DR, such as automated backups and replication of the storage on the back end, plus the easy setup of redundant instances with that cross-region replication. So that can make HADR easier to implement in the cloud compared to on-prem, because all those tools and utilities and infrastructure are already in place. Well, however, with the cloud, there's a greater emphasis on automation and infrastructure as code, which can change how your high availability and disaster recovery strategies are designed and implemented. And then you have to think about the shared responsibility model of the cloud, which means that while the cloud provider takes care of certain aspects of availability, like hardware redundancy, network redundancy, storage redundancy, the customer is responsible for everything else, like the application layer and making sure that your data is highly available. And that's, at SIOS, that's what we do. We have the tools in the clustering software with Lifekeeper that's going to monitor the application tier and take recovery actions, and then DataKeeper continuously replicating it with synchronous block level replication, or between zones, or asynchronous between regions, and then even enabling hybrid cloud models. So people either migrating to the cloud, looking for a way to get their data into the cloud, or just running in a hybrid model on a regular basis with maybe the cloud being their disaster recovery center instead of managing their own. They still have their own data center, but they're using the cloud as their DR site. So at SIOS, we can help facilitate that with our HA and disaster recovery solutions.
When we're talking about how different HADR is in cloud as compared to on-prem, do you also see your customers, users see some unique challenges that they face when it comes to HADR in the cloud, once again, vis-a-vis on-prem?
Often people are new to the cloud, so there are some nuances depending upon the cloud. There's different, way networks, virtual networks are configured that, is going to be a learning curve. So one of the challenges is just really understanding and properly using all the high availability and disaster recovery tools and just the infrastructure tools in general provided by the cloud platform. So each cloud vendor has its own unique set of tools and services, and that can be a learning curve. And if you're doing multi-cloud, then that's 2 times, because every cloud vendor is going to have different tools and different ways to do things. Another issue, the unique challenges with the cloud is just knowing, where is my data? Data sovereignty and compliance. That's something that everyone needs to be concerned about. And some regions have very specific laws regarding where your data can be stored and transferred, and so that will certainly affect how you implement high availability and disaster recovery in the cloud. And then, finally, costs can be a concern. So, cloud providers, again, offer some utilities for high availability and disaster recovery, but everything comes with a price tag, and it's usually, a consumption-based model. So often, using them is going to incur additional charges. Getting a good estimate and managing that on an ongoing basis can be a challenge with creep, things, being implemented in the cloud, and all of a sudden your bill, kind of like my cable bill, seems to go up a couple dollars every month. And so managing that is certainly a challenge.
Since you mentioned cost, I also want to talk a bit about the egress fee that is associated when you migrate or move data, and organizations, they do have to move data for so many different reasons. How does kind of SIOS help organizations with that?
So moving data at SIOS is with our product DataKeeper, and DataKeeper runs on Windows and Linux, and it does real-time block level replication from one server to another, or from one to multiple, from on-prem into the cloud, or between instances in different availability zones in the same region, or even between regions with our asynchronous replication. And so DataKeeper will be obviously moving data when we're talking about from region to region or zone to zone. There's going to be egress data cost associated with that. So SIOS helps manage that by and allowing you to enable data compression before the data leaves the region or the availability zone. Will compress it and then decompress it once it's received. So that can save on your egress data costs depending upon the data type. I mean, I've seen 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 compression ratios. And so that obviously will have a direct impact on your data egress costs.
What advice do you have for customers so that they can build great HA strategy for cloud?
I'd say first you have to understand your needs. So not every application or service may require the same level of availability. So all this comes down into your business continuity plan. You need to categorize your applications. Which one needs real-time replication? Which one is, maybe backup, maybe, 15-minute RTO, RPO. You have to define what that is. So prioritize according to your business needs. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. So that's number one. Number two is, Designed for failure. So you have to assume that every component can fail. And so you must design your architecture in a way that such failures have minimal impact on the overall service availability. I mean, we've seen, I remember a large outage that, Microsoft had with, I think it was Azure Active Directory went offline in one region. And that had such a wide impact across many of their services that they were offering. So you have to look very closely at, at the end of the line, you have this service that someone's consuming, but there are so many components along that chain that need to be available in order for that end service to function. So you need to definitely design for failure for each and every one of those components. The third recommendation I would say is automate where possible. We talked about cloud automation and infrastructure as a code, but the automation can significantly reduce the risk of human error and increase the efficiency and speed up your recovery time. So, one of the things you could do for the high availability is making sure that you have the clustering tools in place, like the SIOS Lifekeeper, that will continuously monitor your applications and automatically take the recovery action when needed. Or even if it's not automatic, if you're doing disaster recovery and you want to push the button, being able to recover all your applications with one single push is so much better than having to, have, your engineer who you don't know in the time of a disaster who's going to be available to implement all the steps in a long run book. If you have the step is push the button, that's so much better than, having to go through a 20-page run book to recover an application. And then finally, you have to test. So you could have all the best plans in place in the world and you think you've covered everything. But if you haven't tested it and regularly test it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. So regular testing ensures that your plan works as expected, and it will help you discover any potential issues. So make sure you schedule your disaster recovery and your HA test on a regular basis.
Dave, thank you so much for taking time out today and of course talk about HA in the cloud. Thanks for all those insights. And as usual, I would love to chat with you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. See you next time. Thank you.